Yes, guys, welcome back to the Cannon Podcast, and we are back again with another Monday/Tuesday podcast. Because of course we couldn't film on Monday, but it's okay. We apologise for that. We're here on Tuesday. It's just me and George today. Alex does not have a cough, nor does he have a watery eye. He has nothing. He's just in the forest. So ask him why when he's on the next podcast. I don't know why, but he's at a forest. But George is not in the forest. George is in Toronto. I'm in London. We're here to talk about Arsenal. George, how you doing, bro?
I'm good, bro. I'm good. Some people call the Toronto, kind of like New York, a concrete
Toronto.
jungle. There's a little bit of
Is it because of
forest
that song?
happiness. Sorry?
Is it because of Empire State? Is it because of that New York song, Empire State of Mind?
Exactly.
Concrete
Exactly.
jungles. Yeah. I need to go to Toronto one time. I've been in New York.
You
Is
gotta
Toronto
come.
and New York very similar?
Very. They come like baby New
Okay.
York is Toronto. So
Okay.
yeah.
Because I would have thought that would be Philadelphia, no? Because Philly's next to New
No.
York and it's kind of this.
No, just because Philly's a lot. Like Toronto's got the skyscraper and like
Yeah, they've
the
got
major
a
city
few skyscrapers in
vibes.
Philly, but that's about it. Okay,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
makes
yeah.
sense. That makes sense. Philly's very much like if you
City
can
of
go like
brotherly love.
London, if New York is like London, then Philadelphia's like Birmingham. Um, But yeah, there's that. Anyways, George, let's talk about the Arsenal. Let's talk about Arsenal's performance over the weekend. It was controversial not because of a performance, but because of the red card. And look, we could go and rant about how the referees are poor and how there needs to be a change and all that type of stuff. But we talked about an instant reaction. You can check that out if you want, guys. We're here to talk about the analysis of the game itself and the fundamentals of what we can improve on and how we can focus on ourselves. So, George, I'm going to pose you a question about Declan Rice playing once again as a number 8. There's been a lot of discourse mainly on Twitter talking about how Rice playing as a high 8 isn't working, and of course red card was one thing, but the performance itself, he seemed like he was phased out of the game. And so what do you think right now coming into this season is Declan Rice's role as an 8, and where do you think he kind of develops with the arrival of Marino when he's fit and available after 2 months? We'll see how that develops. What do you think is happening with Rice right now?
I think it's a debate in terms of how you want to see his best qualities on the pitch, right? And it's a debate about what are those best qualities. Look, there's a lot to be said about how we use our eights and the roles of those. I mean, I think even Martin Odegaard in these last couple of games, for me, he hasn't had the same role as last year, where last year I felt like kind of, I think Mikel has almost gone back to this initial idea of having our eights higher, generally speaking, both eights higher. And you see Martin Odegaard, who I think is at his best football when he drops into the middle third and he operates a little bit more alongside the pivot or drops to help us build up and then is able to help dictate our tempo, as opposed to being somebody that lives off the last line, receives in the last line, and operates there. I, for one, have always felt that he's somebody that arrives best into those zones. And I think the role of Rice and Odegaard are interlinked. If Odegaard is going to be the deeper of the midfield, then your other midfielder naturally must be a lot higher up, must have a lot more low touch, must be somebody that's a little bit more of a stretcher, somebody that has a lot of maybe responsibility in terms of second balls, in terms of a lot of responsibility in the press and backing up the press. But fundamentally, they're not somebody to stick back. And that's kind of something that we saw with Granit Xhaka in isolation, right? And that was the idea that I think in terms of buying Mikel Merino. He's not somebody that's a terribly high touch player. He's incredibly efficient, especially with low touches. And I think you're asking Declan Rice to basically perform an iteration of that. And the reason that I don't think it's great is because I don't think Declan survives off that. I think the more touches that Declan does, the better it is for him on the ball. And I think if you're asking me, can Declan run? Of course he can run, but I don't think that his best qualities are meant to just be an off-the-ball shuttler, making runs between the fullback and the center back to create space for others. That's not, for me, the best use of Declan Rice. And that completely ignores, by the way, what that means in a defensive positioning in which you're now having Declan Rice running back to goal as opposed to play coming to him. And he can do both because he's a brilliant athlete. But, if you're asking me what is Declan Rice's superstar quality, categorically, he is one of the best anchors in the world. And the reason he's one of the best anchors in the world is because in terms of the ball coming to him, in terms of him being able to defend space, he is one of the best in the world at that, if not the best in the world at that specific skill. So having him so high has, to me, detrimental effects, not just in possession, but also out of possession that we need to consider as a fan base. And, this is something that Mikel has to address. I mean, I think for large parts of last year, we tried to find a balance that made sense. We tried to find a balance that would give us something more. I think the initial idea of having Kai Havertz in that role is something that you can maybe understand, because this is a guy that, Kai Havertz is somebody that has good facilitation, but I wouldn't call Kai Havertz incredibly efficient with lots of touches. To me, he's somebody that drops in, 1-2 touch to help get out of trouble and then run. 1-2 touch to explode out of play. 1-2 touch to maybe help us get out of tight spaces. But as far as his specific role, it's the off-the-ball work. That's one thing that we really appreciate about Kai Havertz. And I think when we're discussing roles in midfield, we need to discuss roles in this way, because right now, one of the biggest criticisms for Brighton I had was that our eights were too high, our eights were not effective. Again, Rice and Odegaard weren't effective. So it's about making sure that we try to find balance in another way. And I want to throw a question to you. I mean, we talk about balance a lot, but in terms of maximizing players, right? There could be an argument that's been said that Mikel has really tried to maximize Kai Havertz as well as Martin Odegaard in this team, but it has potentially been at the detriment to other people, like potentially Declan Rice, as well as Gabriel Martinelli. You look at the coordination of that side and the fluidity issues, platforming Havertz so that the winger is wide is an option. Platforming Havertz so that Declan Rice is performing Shuttler roles is, in order to give Kai Havertz the platform to score, give him the platform to really succeed on the pitch. But you have to ask yourself, are we maximizing our £100 million asset? I don't know, especially in this role.
I get the feeling right now it's very makeshift. And we saw him play the end of last season, and he was well. Because of the first half of the year, Rice is still better than Havertz as an 8. In our team, he still offers us more on the ball, and I think he's still more comfortable in pressure as well. Havertz, when his confidence is low in the first half of the season, wasn't working there. But it feels like, to me, right now, it's makeshift for Mourinho to arrive into the team and start on the left-hand side. He's more of the profile that we need. But I think the idea that Mourinho's going to come in and Martinelli or Trossard, whoever starts on the left-hand side, or even Sterling, is going to automatically thrive because he's now the perfect profile. I'm not actually sure, because if it's still low touch, how is Martinelli going to find that passing profile? Mourinho is definitely better than both Rice and Havertz in that role, so he's going to improve Martinelli. But I think this idea that he's Odegaard at the left-hand side now, and they're going to have this Odegaard and Saka combination straight away, it'll take time to adapt, and it'll take time for them to understand each other's games as well. But it's kind of annoying now, just to hear the news that 2 months Mourinho's been ruled out for with a shoulder injury in his first training session. So now it becomes a question of, next game, there is no Declan Rice available. It's annoying, but he's not available. What do we do then? Thomas Partey, Jorginho, is a pivot maybe? Would you play? I don't think he's going to trust Ethan Nwaneri. My instinct is going to go, Mikel's going to go for Havertz in midfield again, which is going to cause a lot of controversy. But what would you do? What would you do for that game?
There's a lot of questions there, because you're talking about it. Who else have we also got rid of? Fabio Vieira, Emile Smith-Rowe. So when you're talking about options at this point, it looks quite light, right? And you've got basically two options, right? You've got the Havertz that you've selected, but then there's also the Jorginho 8 with a Declan D option, right?
Which you've never seen before.
Right, but
you've never seen Jorginho as an 8.
You could almost do that, though, with Thomas Partey. We saw that with Declan last year, but the theory is the same. You have a lone anchor, and you basically have Jorginho be the 8 while Odegaard's up there. Look, the tough thing with that is I just think that Tottenham's midfield is something that is actually quite lightweight, and their defense, for me, is very disorganized. If you have runners, you can really hurt this Spurs team. And this Spurs team are very direct. So I think it's going to have to become really position dependent, at least until Declan's back. And then when you start asking yourself questions long term, I don't think the Kai Havertz at midfield is as big of an issue. I think right now people were looking at the confidence of Kai Havertz and then saying that's now a rule thing, when I don't think it's actually the case. I think him in midfield and him in striker actually perform pretty much the same duties. It's about how you make that up, right? And how you balance that surrounding midfield. The problem for me is I think that Kai Havertz is best in midfield for us, particularly in terms of what he gives us off the ball, particularly in terms of what he gives us in terms of winning second balls, and particularly in a derby, which I think for me, that's going to be the focus. Like, the running power will be where you lose or win the game for me. So I think this isn't a game where we're pushing people back. This isn't for me a United or another poor top six team that we're looking to pen in. This is a Spurs team that will be confident, that will play on the last line, that will play a high line, and that will beat you. So you need to fight fire with fire, for me. I think having a lightweight midfield whilst Spurs press and operate with a high line mean you're giving them far too much respect and you're not testing their back line. So I think Kai Havertz at left 8, especially how he was used against Villa, if you remember last year, again, one of the most misinterpreted games on the timeline. People got so upset.
Result-based analysis.
Yeah, it was actually one of our better performances, but obviously the result didn't go our way. And so then people over-indexed that and said that we played horribly, which was not the case, Quick plug, we did a rewatch on it on the Patreon, so if you wanted to go check that out, I mean, we kind of dispelled that myth. And I think Kai Havertz in that role works best. The one question that, you could have is it time for Calafiori to be introduced at this point? After the international break, he's had a little bit of cameos. That could be something where you've got Kai Havertz at left 8, and we decide who we want at left wing, whether that's Trossard or Martinelli, depending on who you feel is needed in form. I think Gabriel Martinelli is absolutely needed, especially with the space that Tottenham give in wide spaces. Again, they push up so high, and their fullbacks aren't very good in terms of running back to goal. So the ball into the channel from wide spaces, basically from touchline to your center back, is where the space is going to be from a Spurs perspective. So while I think Trossard can give you a lot out of possession and a lot more efficient decision making, I think that the runs into those areas are going to be key to making sure that you thrive. Now, the one debate that we could have, by the way, is if you have Kai Havertz at left 8, does that mean that Gabriel Martinelli can thrive? I don't think so. Because if Kai Havertz is the one that's tasked with stretching the back line and making sure to run off the back line and find space in behind in that kind of zone from the touch line to the center back, then you need to have somebody that's got a little bit more technical retention, somebody that's able to receive and recycle the ball and maybe isn't asked to stretch, but is asked to come in and fill in when Kai Havertz leaves and vacates. So the question becomes, who's the striking partner to Kai Havertz? Are we going with Jesus, who's injured? Is he recovered?
Is he fit? Yeah.
Is he fit? Eddie's gone. So who's the striker?
Yeah.
Is Trossard a striker? Is Trossard false 9 while Jesus is out? And Kai Havertz is left 8, and we have Gabriel Martinelli at left wing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of changes that you can do. There's a lot of things we can do. We've now got Raheem Sterling, who can also play false 9. A lot of things. So to give you an answer, not sit on the fence, because that's what everybody comes for. I do think that
The Alex special.
Yes, exactly.
Different games require different players.
Yeah, exactly. I do feel that the false 9 role, we have to define a role, right? If we're having Kai Havertz as the stretcher in midfield, I believe that the false 9 has to be someone that's incredibly efficient, able to drop in deep, and incredibly reliable to receive in tight spaces, and not be a maverick, because your maverick is Kai Havertz, who's running beyond. Now, for me, that screams Trossard. And then what that screams is not necessarily Gabriel Martinelli, which I hate to do. It screams Raheem Sterling at left wing for me. And
Crazy.
It screams how I would set up, and this is just me, is I would have Trossard, if Gabby Jesus is not fit, and we've got a case obviously with Declan not playing, I would have Raheem Sterling off the left. I would have Trossard as a false 9, Bukayo Saka, and I would have Kai Havertz, Martin Odegaard, Thomas Partey, and at left back I would have Calafiori or Timber, depending on who's really fit. Like, I don't know if Calafiori is fit enough for 90 minutes and all that, but I would trust him footballing wise. I would do one of those two and have Calafiori basically join
Spurs
the
away.
box. Yep.
That would be his first ever Arsenal start.
No problem with that. That guy's a battler. I think at some point, we bought him to be a starter. If you're afraid to put him at Spurs away, then why did we buy him?
I don't think it's a fear. I think it's just
pounds?
It's a bit of a safety net. And yeah, of course it's going to be fair. If your first ever start is Spurs away. But I would ask you about Urian Timber, though, because he looks like he's fine. He came off with a cramp, as Mikel confirmed. He's gone to international duties with his brother. But what about him as an 8? Do you not think there's a possibility you talked about in the summer of him playing as an 8? Do you reckon Mikel could try it? Because he's talked about it, in a press conference a few weeks ago that he sees Timber as a midfield option as well.
Absolutely. But that also means, where does Kai Havertz play? This is all to do with Kai Havertz, right? If you're keeping Kai Havertz at striker and he's able to stretch, then you must put a Urian Timber. And then you actually must put Calafiori at left back. right? Like Urian Timber in midfield is a phenomenal option in terms of you having a defensive complement. But what it does do is it puts a little bit more onus on the fullback to overlap in these situations, because you don't want both Urian Timber and that left back to be the one doing the same duties, right? And so it kind of, in a sense, you're asking a lot of your left wing if Urian Timber is going to be your midfield eight, and he has to be a stretcher, and he has to be someone that retains the ball, because Urian Timber for me is a defensive shuttler. He's somebody that will come in, collect second balls, be able to make off the ball runs. He is a passer as well. I think he would be a phenomenal option at 8. The trouble I have with all this is, can he last 90 minutes? There is a question with Urian Timber about that right now. For as much as you're telling me Calafiori could have a question about his first start in 90 minutes, I think it could be an even bigger start. Can Urian Timber last 90 minutes in a Spurs away derby? I mean, he's also never played in a derby. You're basically asking me, there's 2 options that must start, and both haven't played in a derby. So it's kind of a horses for courses, and I think it depends on Kai Havertz. If you're convinced he's at left 8, then it's a left back choice. But if you're convinced he's a striker, then Urian Timber could be an option in midfield. The one thing that I'll end on is you've got 2 experiments that you're going to have to do at this point with Urian Timber, and that's a lot to the 11. You don't know how Urian Timber will react at left 8, but also how will Calafiori react in his first start, which you need with a Urian Timber at 8. If you have Kai Havertz at left 8, we've seen what Trossard could be like as a false 9. We've seen that in this team.
And Sterling gets Premier League experience.
For sure. And we've seen Sterling at left wing. We've seen Kai Havertz at left 8. The only question is at left back. And I think to a team, you can't have more than 2 or 3 questions to a starting 11, let alone in a derby. But this is just me for balance. I don't like to see more than 3 or 2 experiments in a team. You want to have 1 experiment, no problem. But generally speaking, more than 2 could be an issue for a team to get consistency and flow.
No, it's true. It's true. And it also just shows how important the Sterling signing was now, that one simple red card, because of a little kick of the ball, has changed so much on our side. If we didn't have Sterling as an option, you would start Martinelli alongside Trossard, but you're at bare bones because you got no one to come off the bench. No Nelson, no Eddie, no Emil, no Fabio. Now you've got Raheem as an option. If you start Raheem, his first ever Arsenal game, starting him off on the derby away, he can't do that in my eyes, because he's played in those games before. He's played against Spurs away, and he's got a lot of, he's also got that. I think
perfect.
if you watch his interviews,
a big game player in that sense.
Fantastic. He's come into this side now, and you've watched his interviews. He's got this, eye for vengeance. You can sense that he's gone like, I've got a point to prove. You will see the best of me. And even it's a little announcement video, but I feel like there's a part there where he goes, look, the entire world thinks I'm rinsed. I'm 29 years of age. I've won 4 Premier League titles, and the world thinks I'm rinsed. And the way that some Arsenal fans are reacting to the signing, as if it was Anthony, as if we were signing the worst winger in the world, I think he's going to come with a point to prove. And I think people will be surprised by how many games he'll start, because he is kind of, in a way, what Mikel wants on the left winger. Martinelli's got the pace, so is Raheem Sterling. He's not as clinical as Trossard or Martinelli, but he's got so much of the... he's the mix of both. He's got the pace of Martinelli, but the technical quality of Trossard in tight spaces, and then acceleration as well in these type of big games, to break through Spurs' high line. I think it'll be fantastic, and the experience of going to Spurs away. I don't think I'd be surprised if we saw Raheem start, and also, I'm not surprised to hear that they got number 30. There were some rumours, George, that he was going to get number 10. But that was dispelled by Arsenal today. Even I thought he was going to 10, to be fair, because it was on the website for a while. It said that you could buy Raheem Sterling 10, but maybe it was just a Photoshop. And then Sterling 30. So do you think Raheem? We've done obviously a scouted on the YouTube and a full scout on the Patreon as well. If you guys can check out Raheem Sterling in this game here. Do you reckon it's a good chance he starts?
I would do it. I mean, I think it's something where we've got 2 weeks. This is actually a brilliant time to do it. And,
fantastic,
he's also...
And Trossard's not gone internationals either, by the way, so you can combine with Trossard and work with him there as well.
I think that's going to be an incredibly important alternative right now. I don't know, again, how long Gabby Jesus' injury is out for, but, again, I think if you're looking at somebody to replicate that false 9 role, I think I'm looking at Trossard to do the best of that. And I think with Raheem Sterling, he gives you a level of what we said at the very least, a profile that we don't have as much, and that's somebody that can come on the inside, that can also go on the outside. He gives us a certain level of, for me, especially in the scouted, if you see, on that left-hand side, he's quite efficient in the pockets. And, you know, I think that for me, the best topic about Raheem is that you're looking at somebody who's a big game player, somebody that knows the system because he's played under it with Mikel. He's he's been coached to it with Mikel. And I think it's a little bit now about us making sure that I think we provide balance to the team. I've really felt in these last two games that we haven't had balance in midfield, and balance in midfield has led to two games that haven't been as convincing as we could have made them. And I feel like one of the biggest issues with Brighton was making sure that our eights were more involved. And half of that is to do with the balance that we've had in midfield. So Raheem, to me, can solve quite a bit of things. And at the very least, you're talking about a quite experienced front line. Like if you're talking about a derby where there's a lot of unknowns and there's a lot of unknown factors, and you're looking at Mikel, what does Mikel always lean on? Squad and seniority experience. Like that has been his thing.
Sometimes annoyingly.
Yes, sometimes annoyingly, but I think in this specific instance, it makes the most sense to me, where you're having a front six of people that you've seen play in these positions, as opposed to saying, okay, Yuri and Timber, who I've been the biggest proponent on of X, okay, it is an experiment. It is something that I don't think we know what can do. I still believe in that potential. I still think that's an incredible potential. And I do actually see him as an alternate to Marino in that instance, a genuine one. But my problem is, do I want to experiment on that in the first North London derby, in a game, by the way, that Yuri and Timber's off in internationals for? Kai Havertz can come in and knows what he needs to do at left eight. Yuri and Timber were trying to coach into that possibility. Again, Trossard, who hasn't gone with his internationals, Sterling, who hasn't gone with his internationals, both that can sit there and end up doing that and training for those roles and have done that in the past. So again, I think that's the most important thing. We're talking Derby, and we're also talking Tottenham. How can we hurt them? Again, somebody like Raheem running off the left, the only thing that you could say in an argument sense is both Raheem and Gabriel Martinelli give us that dynamic runner off the left, right?
Mm-hmm. No, they do.
So it's a choice between who do you think is the most informed, the most able to do it. So I'm not too bothered who does it, but I will say I think Raheem not deserves, because that's not the right word, but I think Raheem starting is something that fans would like to see. I think Mikel would like to see, and it gives him a chance to back up his talk, mate. Like you said, I thought that was a brilliant interview, but I mean, he does well in a derby. What a way to start off your loan. And I think he could use it as a platform, because then we're going to face City really soon, and I guarantee you that was one of Raheem Sterling's best performances last season at Chelsea. Was against City.
He scored against him as well.
Yep. So
he scored in both games, I'm pretty sure, home and away.
He did. Point to prove. Oh, wow. So I think I think we need to get him up and running, personally.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, our last goal at City was Rob Holding, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, nuts.
So we need goal scorers at City, for sure. And I think people will be caught off surprise by how important Sterling becomes. I'm not saying he's a guaranteed starter for the long-term future, but there will be games that he suits exactly what we need. And Mikel won't be scared to start him because he's got a mix of everything. He's got the seniority, but he's also a high-quality player. You know, it's not just like sometimes players have the experience of, you know, being a good player, but an average at best, right? Sterling's been a high-quality player and put in an environment where he's got less to think about and he's got things that are happening for him. I think, you know, his biggest issue being decision-making will be solved in a way. And I think that's why Mikel kind of helped him so much at City, because he was put in an environment where he was given options, very simply put, and allowed to do his magic in other parts of the field as well. So I'm very excited to see how he does, you know, and I think, you know, there's a good quality chance that he could prove his name at Arsenal this year, and you know, we never know what happens in the future, but he's still 29, and I think that's what people need to understand is he's still got a lot to offer. And if he had lost his pace, if he had had a major injury in his career, I'd be a lot more concerned. But watching clips of Sterling from his Chelsea time and obviously City as well, that acceleration is still there, that burst is still there, and I don't think there's a single player in our squad that can offer us that in that short, tight spaces. You know, Martinelli has the pace, but he's more for open spaces. With Sterling in those tight spaces, I think there's a very good chance that he'll impress fans. So Raheem starting against Spurs, we'll see about that. Martin Odegaard playing as an 8 as well. He's just won the Arsenal Player of the Year for 22-23, or 23-24, sorry, a year behind now. What do you make of the whole current, as a discourse, but it was a bit of a poor performance against Brighton. Did you believe it was more systematic, or was it the player himself? And how can we, change that? Because if it is going back to the role at the start of last season, We're not going to see the Odegaard at the end of last season, and that was a very, very high quality player. But is it because we've got Timber now playing as an inverted fullback, and we don't have Calafiori or Kivior starting there instead?
I'm glad that you misspoke with the Kivior and Calafiori thing because they're actually the same profile in terms of what we'd ask for
Yeah,
role, right? So,
yeah.
like, I mean, look, the question that I'm going to ask of you is, do you like? Actually, I'll throw it back to you instead of me being
Go
tactically
on.
speaking. So
Ooh,
you got Martin Odegaard, right, this season. What did you make of his performance against Brighton? And do you like
I think he
him in a
struggled.
role that's high and that's higher?
Never have, never have. It doesn't suit his strengths. You can see, he's a player who he needs the feel of the ball, and the more he's away from the ball, the less he's going to be involved in the game. He's not got that. He's not as instinctive as a Havertz at times, where he can kind of phase himself out of games and just provide a moment out of nowhere. He has to be on the ball all the time. He's a metronome of the side. More Modric than De Bruyne in my eyes, right? So in that aspect, for me, I want to see him drop off deeper. And the idea that now we've got Timber inverting at times, and you've got Zinchenko starting, and you got players like that. I think it's made Odegaard's role dropping deeper less of a need, especially with Partey starting as well, and that progression coming to him. And I think he's not as effective playing high up the pitch. So for me, the question becomes how can we replicate a dynamic from last season? But can we do that if you got the Timber inverting on the left hand side?
Yeah, I mean it's difficult, right? Because when you ask for Iggy and Timber to invert, you essentially are asking for a pivot, right? Like a midfield
Exactly.
pivot, and that doesn't leave space for Martin Odegaard to do what he does best. I mean, a lot
No.
of times last season he was the one joining the pivot, right? And in terms of what we asked our left back to do, it was a conglomerate of roles. I mean, I think that when you're looking at Spurs and you're looking at Martin Odegaard, I maintain he's somebody that, when played up high, will never give you the output that you need in those positions. And also by receiving high,
Nor
and
the influence.
no, nor the influence. And I just think that he also doesn't have the same, for me, running power higher up the pitch when he receives to burst into space, to break. We're
Yeah.
not talking about a
Yeah.
De Bruyne. We're not talking about those types of midfield. Again, an Emile Smith Rowe or those types of midfielders that can
A
break.
10.
Yeah, like we're not talking about that type of player. We're talking about an all-phase central midfielder who has the freedom to move about how he wants, who needs touches of the ball to make sure to set the tempo of the team, and ideally has the space to at least exploit his eye for a pass with people that run. And for me,
Yeah.
when you've got Kai Havertz in that left eight position who's stretching back lines, who's running onto his strong foot, having Martin Odegaard similarly high destroys it. Because who is
It does.
going to have that crossfield ball? It opens up naturally to him. So I think getting him deep again is going to be critical to us finding form and finding form for him. Uh, so it's about knowing your players, mate. And I think that it's very clear that Mikel ideally sees a true pivot and ideally sees his two eights as those who can exploit in the last line. He's now gone back to this point 2 seasons running. This is not coincidence. I mean, we started this
It's
way
a long
last
time idea.
season, right? And then now we've gone and we started this way after having the success of last season. I'd actually, you know what? Maybe I'll ask you. Like, do you agree with that? Like, do you believe that Mikel in his ideal squad configuration sees one of his eights dropping deep into the pivot? Or do you think that was more of initially a necessity to the team that he said, oh,
Yeah.
look, wow, and then Martin performed the role brilliantly?
No, he done. He done. Yeah, it was definitely an adaptation because let's not forget Zinchenko was injured, and Kivio we tried reverting and he was really struggling. So Mikel said, okay, look, how can I change that? And obviously with no Thomas Partey as well to help with the progression and help Declan Rice, dropping down Odegaard was definitely helping that, and it worked nicely. And I think when you watch Martin Odegaard at his best, if you ask Arsenal fans, the key highlights of Martin Odegaard, they will say him dropping deeper, picking up play, playing a 1-2, playing a lovely pass from deeper, not him picking the ball up in the final third and dribbling past two players, and or, putting a half space crossing because he's not that type of player. And so that's where it's definitely an idea Mikel has because like if he's gone back to it again at the start of the season like we've seen, he wants to have that long term. And then it does really put a lot of questions over Odegaard as a player, and his profile. Because if Mikel wants that and he's not playing to Odegaard's strengths, I'd even say give Wanyeri 4 years time, right? He's more of a 10 than Odegaard is. And if Mikel wants a 10 more than 8, then Odegaard's going to either have to adapt his game massively, which I don't want him to do either, or Mikel's going to have to adapt. So I think Mikel's got a style of play, and that's perfectly fine. But if you're going to have Odegaard in this team, you have to adapt on the player as well. And right now, we're not playing to his strengths.
Yeah, and I think you could say that for again a lot of the team right now. There is a level of kind of makeshift. And the one thing that I wanted to say too is I feel like a couple injuries have shown you maybe how lightweight that the team that we've made is. There was a lot
Of
of
course, yeah.
suggestion that previously that there was this one in, one out policy. And I do mean Mikel did make a reference in terms of how we were short. And I never understood the logic for why people were saying one in and one out. And I always pushed back on it. And I'm looking at this team, and I don't know, I'll throw it back to you. Like one Declan Rice injury, one Gabby Jesus injury. Again, one injury to people that, by the way, we have players that we know. Gabby Jesus has not been available. I think Declan, this is odd. It's very rare not to have Declan available. So I think it's unfair to use that as an
Pretty
example.
sure it was available all of last season.
Completely was. And I mean, is this not one of his first red cards in his career?
His first ever career red card.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's quite literally an outlier. I should say everything, by the way, to what Chris Kavanaugh did, but we're not referencing that. Um, anyways, the point that I'm trying to make is with Gabby Jesus out injured quite a bit. I think that you've got, again, we don't know how Yuri and Timber will return. Mikel Merino out. There's a couple of injuries that have happened to the squad, and
There's
it shows.
three key missing players there.
Yeah, and it does show a little bit of a vulnerability. Let me say that to me, at least in the squad. You've got no Reese, you've got no Eddie, no Fabio Vieira, no Emile Smith-Rowe, and for whatever reason, we have to find a way to supplement that that kind of that. How do I put this? We have to supplement that balance. We have to supplement that depth in the right way, and I think we have it. The only problem that I would ask and return to you is we're talking about roles for so many different players right now, right? What is your ideal evaluation of our midfield? What do you feel like the best way to use Martin Odegaard and Kai Havertz should be?
We've seen it, and I'd still believe Havertz for me is better as a striker in this current side with our current options as well. I'd rather have him as a 9 than anyone else in my team right now, and especially with his record recently as well. So that's my answer to the Havertz side of it. Odegaard, we've seen him at his best last season, dropping deeper. So you have to stick to that. You're forced to stick to that because he's not going to give you the option to be that dynamic player in the final third. You know, he can arrive into the final third and make moves at the end of it, but being in that final third and having that two-way drive of overlapping but also coming inside as well, he's not got that. So you have to play to his strength. You're forced to, and so I believe we're going to have to almost revert more to our tactics to the end of last season, which worked pretty nicely, by the way. We won nearly every single game in 2024. We've lost zero away games, lost one home game all season, all year. So I think that's the best way. We've seen it work before. You can't change that too much, but the issue then becomes with the left back. And then the need to invert there. I mean, what would you rather have? As more of a tactical person, would you rather have your 8 dropping deeper or your fullback inverting? Or rather you fall back out wide and then having Odegaard drop deeper?
In an ideal term, for me, I feel that fullbacks high and wide are my ideal option. I think people that hold
Is
the
that what you
width.
talk about Fonzo Davies all the time?
Well, a little bit. That's my
Fonzie.
personal. That's my personal vision and subjective vision. I think Mikel has probably pretty much guaranteed that at one point he wants one side to invert, whether that's right or left. That's just how he sees his team. And I think in an ideal term, we've seen really instances where Mikel, for me, doesn't even want a traditional back four. He's always wanted a 3-4-3 diamond in the manner of kind of Cruyff. And that's to me how I think he sees his team, ultimately speaking. So the biggest question to that, I think, becomes, okay, how do you build what Mikel wants versus maybe what you want? And that's a little bit of a different story. I think you have to ask yourself who's the most important players in this team. And I would argue, who are the £100 million players in your team? They are Declan Rice. They are Bukayo Saka. They are William Saliba. To me, those are the non-negotiable £100 million leaders in each department. And so platforming them is the most important thing for me. And it's really as simple as that. And I think I have been left frustrated because I do feel that we've platformed Kai Havertz and Martin Odegaard. And we've made a choice to do that. Now, this works as long as they're providing output and they're providing the reason for their platforming. But for whatever reason, I do feel that we need to look at our team and put priority differently.
No, it's true. It's true. And I also think it's a lot of trust in terms of letting Fabio go on top of Emil and having Ethan there. I don't know if you saw it recently, but we had our Champions League photos come out of the players posing it, with the Champions League thing behind them, and Ethan was a part of that first team shoot. So that for me is confirmation that he's a part of this first team. Miles seems to have it harder with the left back situation and the midfield there as well. But for me, Ethan's a lot further ahead in terms of the gap there.
Well, he
With
has
no
spot.
Fabio and no
I don't even
O'Neill,
think it's quality.
there's
There's just room.
yeah, there's room there, but also the quality as well. I'll be honest, man. Seeing him play, was it the Emirates Cup against Lyon or was it Leverkusen, coming on in the right eight with the Bukayo Saka? I was really impressed, and I feel like there's a good chance that Mikel at times will be forced to use him because Martin Odegaard has had a few little niggles in the past, and if he's injured for a game, who else are you going to play on the right hand side? Kai Havertz potentially, but then if Jesus is injured, who's playing up front? I think there will be games that Ethan Wanyama will be forced into the side, and I personally trust him. It's a lot to trust in a 17-year-old, and especially off the ball, and he could at times be found out, but I'm excited to see how far Ethan develops his year because I believe putting that pressurized environment, you either sink or you float, and I think he'll float.
You know me. I've been propping these youngsters for over a year at this point, and the trust that they
Yeah.
needed. So I have no problem with considering Ethan Waneri. I just think that some of our problems that we saw against Brighton, for me, were a little bit more balance related than they were like personnel and looking for difference in personnel. And I think the biggest thing that I noticed with Brighton also, it wasn't as bad as people thought. It's just the card really swayed the story of the game. And
No, so
you know,
that's what it was. Always is.
especially in
Result
terms of
based.
the first half, I thought that our press was actually incredible, and I thought that we were
No, it
doing a
was.
really good job in terms of stretching Brighton's back line. There was a real, I think Martin Odegaard for me missed an open net in terms of that
No, he
cross,
did.
that first time cross, and he has to do better. But I mean, you do that, and your story is very different. You're talking 1-0 inside 17 minutes, like that's a clear cut chance. And I hate to keep bringing it up, mate, but that's box efficiency. That's
Yeah, no, it
box
is.
efficiency. And we've been doing that far too often. It's not a case of, for me, changing some of our tactics. I've seen that goal being missed far too many times. And it's not on Martin Odegaard, okay? Every player will be faced with that situation. But when the team has a pattern of letting those chances go, that's when it becomes a problem to your team, right?
Yeah,
You
it's
can't
very correct.
isolate an individual moment and say, well, Martin, you need to do better. That's just because Martin's crap. That's not the case. It's the fact that we see that situation arrive with far too many players. I mean, I could even reference the game before with Bukayo Saka, back post header that he just doesn't quite get to. Um, but we've seen that. This isn't a criticism on these players. They're brilliant players. But when the team consistently isn't able to maximize their opportunities in the box, then you start to have to ask yourself, okay, is there something missing in this team? Because we're seeing it happen across the board from multiple players and from different positions. So at what point do you start to say, okay, you're looking at this team and you're saying, I haven't platformed Gabriel Martinelli or any left wing. It's quite touchline, quite isolated. And I'm doing it because I believe that our eights, that are high eights, can give us the output. When they don't give you the output, it puts strain on the attackers to maximize the minimal chances that they're getting. And so I'm looking at it and I'm looking at these balance issues, which I think, by the way, again, I have to say, against Brighton specifically, annoyed with our eights, but I think that we were actually quite good in the first half, especially in the way that we were stretching Brighton. So it's just unfortunate that we've had the game taken away from us.
Yeah,
And we
yeah,
still had opportunity to score in the second half with 10 men, which again, you could
yeah.
ask yourself that efficiency
Havertz and
question.
Saka both could have scored. You're right.
I personally feel that the Havertz chance is more glaring than the Saka chance, who I think is stretching, but it's still a chance and still a very good
I think the
chance.
reason why Havertz has got less criticised for that is because the fact that he scored first and he's been very consistent for us, but the fact that he made a chance for himself. I think that's why fans have gone, okay, like, I really want to go you there for not scoring that, but when you've done so much work, it kind of feels a bit harsh, right? But hey, we're
Yeah,
at the stage now we have to be harsh. We're fighting a robot who keeps on winning. They keep on scoring goals, hat tricks for Haaland, and they're not going to slow down. So we have to have this. Those are the fine margins, because if you have it scores that we win that game, we're 9 points out of 9 going into Spurs away. So those are the little margins, and same with Odegaard in the first half and Saka's chance as well. But I totally agree.
I think also, I hate to say this, but there is pressure on the team to make up points in an area that you wouldn't right now. And so I think the derby, like you're looking at it, not only do you have to go and win that, but you have to actually go to the Etihad, and I think we may have to do a little bit better. Brighton
Yeah,
at home was
go for it.
points that we didn't bookmark to lose, ultimately. So it's not over or anything like that, which I've seen a lot of really bad reaction. And maybe that's something to come to at the end.
There's always bad reaction.
Well, but mate, I think it's even worse.
There's never been a draw where Arsenal fans have gone, oh, okay, it's fine.
Well,
No, it doesn't happen.
Well,
it's either we'll panic or we're over the moon.
But
that's just how it is.
Don't you feel that the reaction has been completely overboard, though? Like,
I also,
it was bad.
I mean, I wouldn't say completely overboard. I do believe a lot of fans have given the referee the blame for the game, in a sense. So there's less Arsenal fans going, oh, we're really poor, we're not winning the league title because we don't feel we're good enough. It's like, oh, why was the game taken for us? If it was a poor performance and we'd lost the game, we'd drawn the game because of that, I think then fans would be more annoyed with that.
Yeah. It's just, I do feel that, I don't know, maybe it's just my timeline. I saw a lot of, like, commentary on our ability as a team as well. It wasn't just the ref. Like, I saw limits on the title being gone. And I think that's been a discussion. Game week 3, and I'm flabbergasted. I'm like, wow, like I don't understand. Like, look, it's frustrating the way to lose the game that we lost it, but title gone immediately. I mean, look, this is just the pressure that I think happens when you're facing City, right? So any drop points is kind of a case of saying, well, I know that they can go on a period where they don't drop points for 25 games. So you're sitting there that when do they do it is the question, right? And look, again, the one thing that I'll say is I feel like you need to look at yourselves and what you can control. I'm a big fan of that. You know, when people start to ask me, well, what do you think about City? What do you think about other teams? What do you think about the impact of those other teams doing well? I sit there and I say, sorry, guys, like, I don't approach life that way. I don't look at what others have and I don't. I look at what I have and what I can change and what I can affect in my life. And I put more effort into that than I do in other people. And I think that's how you get success in life. And my only piece of advice when I'm looking at it is, okay, let's talk about things that we can improve, like we've talked about in this podcast, about how we use Kai Havertz and Odegaard as eights. Like, these are things we can improve as a team. Let's talk about them, let's debate them, and let's explore. But to sit there and say, like, how do we make City lose points? Don't make them do anything. How do we not lose points? Let's focus on that.
Oh, exactly. No, we will. And there's, look, Villa Park, Spurs away, the Etihad away, our first 3 away games of the season. It's a test, and it's not normal, but we have to do abnormal things to be.
Away day Arsenal is somebody that I trust.
We haven't lost a single game away from home all season, and if we can continue that after the Etihad and Spurs away, then I'm going to be very confident.
I love when you say that. I love when you say that. I love when you say that.
Yeah, it's crazy. It is crazy. Listen, we've got some breaking news, not Arsenal related, but kind of Arsenal related. Well, George related. Let's just say, your boy is going to Turkey on a season-long loan. Now, we could talk about that and all that's happened there, the Napoli stuff, but I'll talk about the Arsenal news in that aspect, where Fabrizio Romano confirmed yesterday on his podcast, after Arsenal went to confirm the move to Galatasaray for a season-long loan, Arsenal offered him at the start of the window, but said they weren't interested. So, and he was talking about the wages as a major aspect, but also the fact that Arsenal did not believe he was worth the £100 million, and that they're willing to, sign a striking opportunity like Šeško, but they were never intrigued by Osimhen's opportunity.
I don't know about they were never intrigued.
As in, like, they weren't interested to take the deal or bond.
They weren't interested at 120 and 130 million pounds.
Yeah, but £65 million is what Saudi Arabia agreed with, and also still wanted for him.
I think there was an issue with that regardless. I mean, otherwise, why is there a break clause for 75 million euros that certain clubs can attract? And why did he fire his agents immediately? And why did he broker the same Turkey deal that you're saying that he brokered himself? I think that there's been something that has happened. I mean, he fired his agents, right? And he brokered the Turkey deal on his own. So to me, there's been something that's gone on.
Are you his new agent?
Me?
Are you his new agent? Yes.
I'm offering if he's willing to let me
Is that what you've been negotiating all weekend?
Listen, we make moves. We make moves when we can.
Okay.
No, look, I think on the whole Osimhen logic and the idea, I still maintain my point of view, and I don't think that he ended up going anywhere that it made sense for all of the interest in terms of Chelsea. I don't think he was ever going there because of a lack of Champions League football, and I don't buy the wage argument. I don't buy the wage argument that they only offered him £150,000 a week. And, I think that a lot had to go right for Chelsea to do that. And one of those wasn't offering the lowest wages out of any club. I mean, them not being in Europe, does it make sense to you that they would offer the least amount of wages with the worst sporting project? Doesn't make sense to me. So, and I think that when you're talking about what to do in January, I know you're saying he went to Turkey, but I'm retorting to you, 75 million euro break clause in January. What are you doing, Bhavs? What are you doing in
I think
January?
it's a break clause not just January but next summer as well. So that's basically confirmed that he's on the market for the next two windows at that
For
price tag, 75
75
million
million
euros.
euros. So I'm
Yeah,
asking
which is what
you,
60 something million pounds.
look, I'll do it
So I mean, look,
to be exact. Um, I mean, okay, can I ask you something? Because this is all
yes,
debate, right? Before, people kept asking and telling me, listen, we don't know what Napoli will demand, right? I still said, bullshit. I think they were demanding a lot lower, but people would do that. 75 million euros, by the way, is 63 million pounds. Facts. Now, are you telling me that for 63 million pounds on the same wage as Kai Havertz, that's not something that you're willing to do in January? After having a summer where we made a profit on the books as a
I mean
boost to the season?
for all he offers Arsenal in terms of what we don't have, you take it in a heartbeat, and that's why I just wouldn't be surprised if we started to hear rumours. But I was also very surprised not to hear rumours this window, and then to hear from Fabrizio that we were offered him, and we said, nah, not really this window, not for that price tag. For with the price tag now being much lower, what how much did United pay for Hoyland? Similar amounts that what Osimhen's available for,
Same amount.
and so Chelsea will still be in the market for him as well, but we've got Champions League football to offer. They don't. We don't know if they're going to qualify for Champions League this year as well. They've signed Joao Felix on top of that, so I don't know if there's space there anymore. For
How do how
65 or
do
63 million pounds, for me, it's a no-brainer.
how do Chelsea react without their ban coming up?
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
they're going to reach a decision soon. That's been well known.
Hmm.
Look, mate, in general, the one argument that I could appreciate for fans saying that Arsenal didn't spend is that look at your competitors. Did City spend? Did Liverpool spend? Did the top six generally, did they spend? The only ones that really spent are Chelsea, which we know I think are looking towards a ban. And then you're looking at Manchester United as a team that's probably spent money. But even them, they didn't spend massive amounts of money. So is there something coming along that most clubs are seeing in the background that's meant that they haven't spent as much money, even though they had capital and they had holes? I mean, Liverpool had many holes, they didn't address them. City had holes, they didn't address them.
They
Arsenal,
lost Alvarez.
right. Arsenal had holes that we didn't address entirely well. So I take that argument. Um, but again, I would love to ask what you would do in January, what you would do when you see Victor Osimhen at that level. I mean, you've got Ilkay Gundogan making comments, how he's surprised on his Instagram from it. And I mean, with new agents, with a break clause like that, I've always said, is he worth Kai Havertz and that investment? I think undoubtedly, especially now that you've got rid of Eddie and Nketiah, you've got a break in terms of the striker position. And
Yeah.
we've clearly shown that there's a need. I think that you look at these injuries right now and you say, we
That's for
are
sure.
short. So at what point, how do you solve that? And I mean, Benjamin Sesko, by the way, is going to be more expensive than Victor Osimhen in transfer
No,
fee.
he will be. He will
So
be.
like his break clause is now less than the minimum break clause that
He's
Sesko
he
would.
becomes Osimhen's become a market opportunity now. Like £100 million, he was like, this is a major investment, and people think that whole phase five is about signing another £100 million player. If he was worth valued at that amount, I think if Conte wanted to keep him, let's just say, and that there wasn't that fraction there, I think he would still be worth that because Napoli wouldn't have let go of him like that. It's because Conte's very stubborn. He's going to want Lukaku, don't like Osimhen, right? You can go, and because he became available, his price has just plummeted down. And it'd be very smart for us to then go, okay, look, he wasn't worth £100 million to us, but £63 million. It definitely is. That's the same amount we paid. It's less than what we paid for Kai Havertz. So he'd be costing less than Havertz. I mean, wages-wise, as long as it's not astronomical, we're talking £500,000 a week. I think it's, again, doable. And then in terms of convincing the player, like, if he was willing to go Chelsea at one point, if they pay the right wages to him, why not come to an Arsenal who are in the Champions League, who are fighting for a league title? And if we sign Osimhen in January, I think most fans would guarantee, go, look, this is our year to win a title. Because he'd give us... Well, how many goals could he give us the second half of the year? Potentially 10, 15 goals. We've seen players come in like Aubameyang and score so many goals. And for Arsenal, adding that box efficiency, adding that presence inside the box and that goal threat straight away, I think for £63 million is a no-brainer.
Arsenal have done, the one thing I'll say is they've platformed their window that I don't buy any more restrictions. There should be no
No,
one in, one out, period. I
no,
mean,
no.
Reece has been out, right? And he's out for the entirety of the year. So I'm not buying that in January we need to sell in order to have an addition. At some point, we haven't had the addition come in that we needed, right? And um, and again, with Eddie being gone and with Reece being gone, and you only having Raheem Sterling on loan, I really think you need to start thinking about it. Another thing is, when you get a bid at the last minute from Saudi Arabia for Trossard at 35 million euros, there's people that have been debating what you do with that. And I maintain that this team lacks box efficiency, so getting rid of its most efficient player in the box is dumb for me. So I don't think that we're ready for this at
Yeah,
this team. But it does show
no.
like the potential that Saudi could have in terms of assets. And you know who I'm looking at? Less about Trossard. I'm looking at Gabriel Jesus. And I'm looking at
Oh,
at
wow.
what point at what point do we look at that asset and say what we're getting is not good enough? What we're getting for 265K a week on the wage bill and his output in terms of his influence on the team. What are we getting? And it's not enough. It's not enough. It hasn't been enough all of last year. We've been asking ourselves this year what it is. And I do think that you look at January and you look at yourself and you start to say, okay, what are you going to give me? You're playing for your Arsenal career just like Zinchenko has been, in my opinion. You look at these players that have been unreliable for us. Tomiyasu, by the way, is also not void of that. There's many people in this Arsenal team. Thomas Partey, who's in the last year of his contract. Jorginho in the last year of his contract. There's a lot of flux that you could see happening with this team, by the way.
Mhm.
And you're looking for new leadership, and you're looking for new platforms. And that's really what it's coming down to for me. And you're looking at who is impacting your team and who isn't. For me, Trossard, very simply, I don't care about the asset and how old he might be. What is your influence on the team? And what does it take to replace that? So you look at Trossard, how many goals and assists he had. Look at how many points he won individually last season. Look at how
Yeah.
much he's impacted the team in his minutes this season. You can't get rid of that. You're talking about the
No.
Odegaard mischance. Who was responsible for delivering
Trossard.
that? So
Yeah,
at the end of the day, we're going to have to make tough decisions. And I'm sorry if people are willing to make tough decisions with Hale End. I want people to make tough decisions with the superstar people. You can't sit there and be on the wage bill with 265K a week and not be playing
he's
one
not
game
worth
a week.
that for Arsenal. He's
No.
not. He's not. And I think most Arsenal fans will agree in saying, Gabriel Jesus 22-23 was very nice at the start of the year, but in the current iteration of Arsenal, a lot of fans don't put him in our starting 11, and he's earning starting 11 wages, and he's not fit either. So if he was fit and he was always available, you go, okay, cool. If you're not starting for us, but you can still play left wing, right wing, centre forward. There's still an asset there to go. Okay, look, there's a reason to keep you there. But what I don't know if he must have signed a 5-year Arsenal contract. He's had 2 years at Arsenal now, so he's getting to the stage now where it's the best time to cash in on the player. And I don't want to because I like the player itself, but I don't like the unreliability on him. I think that's the issue for me. And him and Tomiyasu are in a very similar boat right now, where too often it's consistently, we need you right now. How useful his profile would have been against Brighton? Really useful, in those types of games there. But we can't call upon him because he's unreliable fitness-wise, unfortunately. And it's like don't want to blame him for being injured because players. I'm sure they don't want to be actually injured, but it's a problem, and you have to be ruthless at times because if we're not, then we're going to be left behind.
Yeah, one of the weird things is I have one of my shouts of the season is, does Raheem Sterling make Gabriel Jesus redundant in his role? I mean, you're asking
In
yourself,
terms of that acceleration, he has it that Jesus hasn't shown for a bit because of his injury. So you could say so, yeah.
and I'm asking you, okay, he comes back from the team, right? And we're able to have Kai Havertz start up top, and we have Mikel Merino back, and we have some of our injured player back. Like in this squad, when we're building the squad and we're building depth, right? As far as this season goes, I've always felt that Raheem Sterling's meant really bad news for Gabby Jesus, not Gabriel Martinelli, but Gabby Jesus. You're looking at the role of a versatile attacker that has a burst, that's able to come deep, by the way, and do Gabby Jesus things. Like think back about Liverpool Sterling. Think back about his ability to drop into pockets on the half turn and carry through many people. That ability to kind of go on mazy dribbling runs, right? That who, by the way, ironically, isn't the most efficient in the final action. Like, if you really think about the player, Sterling for me and Gabby Jesus have incredible amounts of overlap in terms of role, experience, profile. And I think Sterling is just a little bit more explosive. And I think that Sterling has a little bit more different details than Gabby Jesus, who I find is potentially a little bit more technical on the dribble, but Sterling makes up for it in his explosiveness. So there are differences, but I do feel that people will look at Gabby Jesus' role in the team and start to question it as Sterling starts to prove his, if not efficiency, but his ability to impact games and impact Arsenal.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about that moment of chaos, that moment of magic where Jesus off the bench against Bayern last year comes on, he dribbles past a couple of players and squares it off. Sterling is capable of similar. He is. He's not an elite finisher by any means, and I'm not going to put him in that category because he's not. But neither is Gabriel Jesus. So they're both in that same boat where we don't see them as clinical strikers. So it's about how much chaos they can offer, and if Jesus can't offer it consistently because he's injured, and it's affecting his style of play as well. He can't be as explosive because of how injury prone he is as well. And Sterling has that. Then there will be conversations to be had. So we'll see what happens with that. I just want to see Sterling playing this Arsenal team first, and I want to see how Arsenal fans react to it. Because I always remember when we signed Jorginho and everyone was against it. We signed Jorginho. All it took was that winner against Aston Villa, and they will start chanting his name. So it just takes a little bit for fans to believe, and I think taking the number 30 shirt is sensible as well, because it puts less as a player, unless fans get aggy, why has he got a number 10 shirt? He's a lone player from Chelsea. But I just want to see him prove a point, man, because I don't like players get written off who I still think have got a lot to offer. And I think Raheem's been written off massively because he's been put in a poor environment. You look at Kai at Chelsea versus Kai at Arsenal. His entire PR has completely changed now because he's been put in an environment that suits him as a player. And we're a team that, because of our style of playing it is at times predictable, but sometimes for those players, they need that. So they know exactly what they're doing. And Sterling's a player for me that the more and slow and methodical and predictable it is, it will be easy for him to understand and thrive in that space as well.
100%. And look, we're sitting here, I guess, to round out the pod. And the one thing that I look at is new leadership. And I'm looking at this team, and I think it's undergoing a massive transition. The amount of selling emphasis that we did to make the first time a profit in Arsenal history in decades says something. It primes Arsenal for moves in January. It primes Arsenal for I guess making at least giving us the opportunity and the freedom to make moves.
The space.
And there's space there. And I mean, Mikel has said it, but also I have a look at Jorginho and Thomas Partey, who are both in the last year of their contracts. Mate, I don't know about you. Have you calculated their wages? Do you know that collectively we're talking about over 300 grand a week cleared off the wage bill?
100%.
There, so I mean, that's with them alone on freeze, and so
100%.
There's a lot there. There's a lot there that we could do to kind of improve.
I looked at Mikel Arteta's spends per summer at Arsenal, and this was obviously one of our lower ones because we signed Callum Fury, Sterling on a free transfer, and Marino. But with the amount of players that we've sold now, and as you said, the wage base, and also players that are entering that final year of the contract, I think Mikel getting his new deal will be one thing, but then Arsenal want to show Mikel as well how much we back him as a manager. And at that point there, I'm not going to sit here and go 2025, be ready for the summer transfer window because we're still a long way away. But logically, there's a lot of logic suggesting that there's going to be spend because there's more opportunities in the market, as Victor Osimhen you can see there. But also the fact that Arsenal will have less players to sell. You might have Jesus as an option, but we don't have the Emil and then the Fabio and all these players. Most of those players are gone now. Now we're talking about actual first teamers that a lot of fans won't want to see sold, like we saw the Emil Smith Rowe go. We're not talking as much about Nketiahs and Nelsons, who we haven't seen as a part of a long-term future. So we'll see what happens there as well. And yeah, there's an intriguing time coming up. It is unfortunately the international break, George, which I don't know how we're going to survive this, to be quite honest. I'm not looking forward to seeing England play. Actually, maybe they've got a new manager. We'll see how that works out. Lee Carsley, and how that works out with him there. Have you got anything planned for the international break? Are you trying to do something, or is it just busy?
Busy in the life of George. We're
oh wow.
I guess a little exciting thing.
Just negotiate a rumour for Osimhen. What's next?
Negotiating a home. The next on the agenda.
Oh, wow.
That's the next on the agenda.
Loan's been done now. It's a permanent.
It's not permanent yet. We're negotiating a loan with option to buy.
Oh wow. Okay. Is there any incentives in that? Any clauses?
Yeah. The only clause is that the real estate agent has to show me central running power,
Oh
They've
wow.
got to show a level of transition inevitability on the signature, and once we do those
Okay.
things, we're set to go.
Okay. Look, listen. If you need a scouted report, then you and Alex can hit it up, and the guys can check it out on Patreon. I'm sure they want to, if they want to see it. But George, it's been a pleasure as always talking Arsenal. International breaks here now, so we'll see what happens there. Anything that happens will be a podcast as well. Soon, I'm not going to be here for a few days now. Man's going. I'm flying out, not to a forest. Going to forest. We're going to sunny Tenerife to enjoy some vitamin D and have some cocktails and get really tipsy. I'm really drunk, so yeah, that's going to be fun as well. But George, pleasure as always. And do you know what? Give us the famous Cannon Podcast outro.
Pleasure as always, guys. Thank you so much. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. If you guys want to check out some more of our content, you can find our Patreon down below in the description. But we appreciate you. We appreciate all your support and all your comments. We love it. So thank you guys so much. And we will catch you guys with some more content this week. We'll keep you up to date. We'll have some stuff in this interval for you to enjoy. So we hope you guys enjoyed the break. We hope you enjoyed the episode. And thank you again for all your support. And lastly, thanks for keeping it Arsenal.